Racism is dead. We buried it when this nation elected Barack Obama president of the United States. Now African Americans, Native Americans, Asians, and Hispanics alike can stop crying and start celebrating the new millennium Juneteenth, aka Obama's electoral vote count. Do you think I'm joking? Don't be fooled, because I want you to give me concrete examples of racism in the 2000s. We have an African-American president, and using the R word may be detrimental. Mary Mitchell joins me on a journey to freedom and equality tonight on Garrard McClendon Live. Is racism dead? Come on, you know Barack Obama's presidency marks the end of the tragic American foundation. We have all arrived, people, so hey, get over it. Joining me from Studio C is the woman I love to argue with, Sun-Times columnist and intellectual warrior, the one and only Mary Mitchell. Mary, welcome to Garrard McClendon Live.
Thank you so much.
You know, Mary, I read your column all the time, and you know, the white privilege column, it really ruffled some of my feathers. But before we even go there, let's talk about racism being dead. Come on now, it's over, Mary. Barack Obama is president-elect, and we no longer have to cry about race. Come on now, Mary.
Well, first of all, I know you must be joking.
I'm
because
serious.
if you follow the campaign at all, you know that what you saw is that Barack Obama had to work harder for his votes. He had to jump higher. Whenever he reached a mark, the bar was raised. I'll give you Florida, and I'll give you what happened in Michigan. Everything was fine when during the primary, when Hillary Clinton thought she was going to win. But suddenly, after it looked like she was losing, they raised the bar. Now, the guy on the corner knows that the way people have done that for years. The woman who's working as a secretary in the office, who gets up, it's her time for promotion, and then her name moves up on the list. And the rules suddenly change, understand the raising of the bar. So I think that the Barack Obama, it's too early to say racism is dead. I don't think racism is dead at all. I think what we saw is that you can overcome racism, and that's what Barack Obama had to do. Okay,
Mary, you opened it up, because are you saying that if Barack Obama was considered legitimately a white candidate, let's say both of his parents were white, do you think he would have gotten nearly this much scrutiny?
Nearly this much scrutiny. I think no, I don't. It wasn't even a part about the scrutiny. I think all candidates get scrutiny, but I don't think that he would have to distance himself from everything, from his pastor to, if he had a dog that they didn't like, his dog. He was the bar was raised, and so he was not only had to go through a lot more scrutiny, he had to make concessions that I don't think any other candidate ever was called upon to make. No one else is called to reject, denounce, and then basically distance himself from people who have been supportive, their supporters and their mentors over decades. But he was called upon to do that. He had to even denounce people who weren't his supporters, but that people just didn't like him. And so he had to distance himself from people like Farrakhan, even though everyone knew he's never had anything to do with his campaign.
You know, maybe I'm a little naive, Mary. Maybe I've got rose-colored glasses on, you know, but I want to read something from Dinesh D'Souza's book. He wrote a book a few years ago called The End of Racism. He argues, Mary, that the American obsession with race is fueled by a civil rights establishment that has a vested interest in perpetuating black dependency. He says that we concentrate too much on struggle instead of progress. Do you think that that's a true statement, Mary? We concentrate too much on struggle instead of, hey, African Americans, you know, you've got more privileges now, you've made it.
I'll give you a glass that is half empty or half full. Some people are going to see it as half full. Some people are going to see it as half empty. But the bottom line is the same glass, and the amount that's in it is the same. So if there's a racism, as long as there are people in this country who have the power to exclude folks from communities, redline people when it comes to finance homes and home loans, as long as there are people who are able to use their authority to hold other people back, then you're going to, I can't say that racism is dead.
Yeah, but is can we quantify this though, Mary? Because, you know, what's the difference between, okay, let's look at redlining, for example.
Okay.
Now, there are lots of real estate agents as well as insurance companies that'll say, hey, redlining doesn't exist. We're just going by the particular zip code. And because of that zip code, we have to have a higher interest rate or we have to charge greater insurance fees. I mean, isn't that valid, Mary?
No. 4 or 5 years before there was the meltdown in the home ownership market, people were crying about the predatory lending practices that were going on. And where was it going on? It was going on in poor communities that were predominantly black or Latino. That is modern day racism. But when the rich guys on Wall Street started to have problems, all of a sudden it becomes a bailout situation. While the little guy in the community never got the bailout, you know, what they got was their homes being boarded up and them being set out in the street by the sheriff.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of redlining I'm talking about that still exists in this country.
Yeah, you know what, and what a great segue, because I'm looking at What is White Privilege, one of your columns written, I believe, back in September, and you say that white privilege is when you get pregnant at 17 like Bristol Palin and everyone is quick to insist that your life and that of your family is a personal matter. I want to continue with that, but what do you mean by that, Mary?
Okay, first of all, let me be clear here that article was actually an article that I was quoting from Tim Wise.
Okay.
Tim Wise is an anti-racist activist. This is a white guy. Here is a white guy sharing with readers what he believes white privilege is. And he talks about that in a way that I had not heard a white person talk about it. That is, that when we look at the Obama campaign and people are saying, oh, racism is dead, we're looking at the same exceptionalism. We have an exceptional candidate. We have someone who was extraordinarily talented and extraordinarily charismatic and extraordinarily gifted. We will see the end of racism when somebody as mediocre as George Bush can win an election and end up in the White House. What you have to, when it comes to black people, you have to see someone who is exceptional, and that's the danger here, because white privilege says the White House was for white people, and I doubt today if a black man from the west side of Chicago who grew up and went to great schools and who had a black wife and a black family, I doubt very seriously if we'd be celebrating the same victory that we are today.
Yeah, you know, Louis Armstrong, the trumpeter, said it best. He said, white folks always will have their one favorite black person. And we see that even today with Barack Obama. We see it with the Oprah Winfrey syndrome. And many times, everyone expects Mary Mitchell and Garrard McClendon and the rest of black America to be just like the quote-unquote best of us. Mary, hold tight. And still to come, more thoughts on racism in the new millennium. Is it dead? It will never have a chance for death until everyone, particularly media figures, are on board to say the same thing about it. That it is a hideous mindset to bear. Racism will always have a home here in the good old U.S. of A. That's Charles Burns on the commentary posting to my blog. Welcome back to Garrard McClendon Live. Mary Mitchell joins me from Studio C, and we're discussing racism, a new presidency, and personal responsibility. Mary, let's look at the legacy of slavery. Has it been forgotten? Do history books need to resurrect or write more stuff that is more particular and more accurate about slavery? It seems as if this country hasn't dealt with it adequately.
Well, I think this country would like to ignore it. It is like a wound that if you ignore it long enough, some people think it'll go away. And of course, what happens, they end up in the emergency room, and the pain that they have to go through is far worse. Here's the beauty of the Obama campaign. They figured out, and he knew, because he grew up with a white mother, he grew up with white grandparents. You know, the last thing that they wanted to hear is about race. They get tired of talking about race. They don't want to hear about race. And so he stayed away from the subject of race as long as he could. He was forced to deal with race. But if he concentrated on the economy, if he concentrated on things that we all agree on, like poor education system, gas bills too high, food costs too much money, those kind of bread and butter issues, he he stood a chance of overcoming the issues of race, and that's what he was successful at. Didn't mean racism was dead, just that he found a way to get around it.
You know, Mary, that's a good point. What I was hearing on talk radio, on some of the pundits on television, we heard many of those in the African American community saying that Barack isn't black enough. When is he going to talk about reparations? He's not a real brother. His mama white. Do you think that any of that had any credibility?
Well, no, but I think that what people were trying to say, and these are folks before they really got to know Obama, and they understood that he was going to win, that he stood a chance to win, that look, this is a brother and white people liked him, that they decided, look, we're going to stand down, we're just going to let this brother run his own campaign. Because Obama started out being not black enough, and then at the end of the campaign, he was too black. And that fit. That somewhat black people would be suspicious of a black man who's surrounded by a lot of whites, getting his support from the white community, as well as some whites would be suspicious of a black man who black people supported wholeheartedly.
Yeah, that's a good point. And we may also see racism rearing its ugly head when we look at the comparisons. It's like Barack Obama had to account, as you said earlier, for anyone that he's had any type of cohort relationship with or was even identified with. And Barack Obama also had to defend himself in terms of religious denomination. We didn't really see any of that for the McCain campaign, you know, and I was wondering why. Could that have been a direct correlation with racism, Mary?
Oh, it's definitely a correlation with racism, because, I mean, you think about it, it also showed how John McCain's campaign thought Americans were so stupid, because during the primary, you remember, the whole conversation was about Barack Obama's pastor, former pastor, the Reverend Jeremiah Wright, and the accusations that he said under 20 years of very harsh and ugly language about race. But how are you going to make that argument and then turn around in the general election and accuse a man of being a Muslim, a closeted Muslim? Now, you can't be both. Everybody knows that. You can't be a Muslim and a Christian all at the same time. So that, again, is putting a burden on an African American that you don't put on any other. What is John McCain? I have no idea. Is he Protestant? Is he Lutheran? Is he Presbyterian? You know, hey, he may belong to the Ku Klux Klan for all I know, but that never came up. We didn't care about that.
All we heard was, you know, I'm an American and God bless America. I mean, we didn't hear anything about denominational affiliation whatsoever. Hold tight, Mary. Your blog thoughts are welcome. Is racism dead? Hit my blog at cltv.com/GML. I think there is equal protection under the law. Racism alive and well. What does the world think about Barack? Here's some headlines. Africa conquers the White House. Headline on website of National Democratic Party of Germany. Uncle Barack's cabin, the June headline in a German newspaper. We move on to Arthur Gorski's remark. This marks the end of the white man's civilization. America will soon pay a high price for this quirk of democracy. And finally, wouldn't want the Western world to be directed by a black man. If you say that as a racist comment, you're right, without a doubt. That's Klaus Emmerich, speaker on Austrian TV network, ORF. Man, those are comments around the world about Senator turned President-elect Barack Obama. Is racism still a major issue? Should we concentrate on it at all, or address it as needed? You're getting a major treat today on Garrard McClendon Live today as Mary Mitchell joins us for a free-flowing discussion on the eradication of racism in America. Mary, could you believe some of those remarks?
Of course, but you know what? You still have to remember that in places like Germany, tens of thousands of people came out to see Barack Obama. So you know that that person, whoever is in charge of that publication, is in a minority. And you have to also remember that during the Civil Rights movement, that just because Dr. Martin Luther King led the March on Washington did not mean that every white person came out and was walking lockstep with that agenda. You're going to always have people who are not with the program. what you want to see and what we saw through this election, that there was a rising tide of whites who were willing to look at someone who was not white,
yes,
and give that person an opportunity to realize his dream.
Yeah.
That's the most important thing, is that you cannot let those people who are still racist, because you're not going to kill racism. Racism has to die.
Yeah.
And I think a generation that still hold on to that racism has to die out before you really begin to see people being able to look at another person and judge them by the content of their character.
Yeah, you know, when David Axelrod and David Plouffe were describing the Obama campaign on 60 Minutes, they said, no, Barack Obama is a candidate. Of course, he happens to be black, but we're not going to push him as a black candidate. That would be political suicide. You agree?
I definitely agree, and it would also be inaccurate, because we've really failed to address the fact that we are operating under this is 2008, and we're operating under a one-drop rule that says whenever someone has a drop of black blood, they become black. And we know he has a white mother.
Yes.
The accurate thing is that he is a non-white. He's a non-Caucasian, first non-Caucasian to go into the White House, or he is biracial. That's the accurate description of who he is.
Now, Mary, you're reading my mind. Why you got to go there? Because, look, the next note I have here is Barack Obama a black president? Or should we be discussing ethnicity, the concept of it, the reality? What about the one-drop rule? Now, check this out. A few days ago, I got some phone calls. People were saying, well, you know, Barack Obama's a mulatto, you know, and I had to kind of correct the person on that. But when we look at terms like mulatto, quadroon, octoroon, sextoroon, I'm 164th black, I'm 128th black, people in the United States are going to look at anyone that is in this situation as a black person, Mary?
Well, yeah, as a black person, we are still doing that. Now, he gets to self-identify, and he has identified himself as black. He worked in the black community. He went to Argyle Garden as a community activist. He could have went up to the north side. He could have went to uptown. He went downtown. He went to Argyle Gardens. He married a black woman. He was a man who could have probably found a woman of any nationality, but he came to the south side and found a sister. He fathered black daughters. So I'm very clear here that he's made he identifies himself as African American. Still, the fact remains he is biracial, and that you cannot just put that on him that he is a black president. That would not be accurate, even if we were to say that. You
know, I'm glad you mentioned that. I need 2 hours with Mary Mitchell. We're going to get you after the break, Mary. You know, and I want to make one comment too about Halle Berry. People say, oh, she's an African American Oscar winner, but do we look at the color, the hue, the complexion, the last name of the person? Hey, email me at cltvtalk@tribune.com. Racism is dead. Do you agree with me or disagree? Feel free to visit my blog at www.cltv.com/GML. Welcome back to a one-on-one with Mary Mitchell, the Sun-Times columnist I love to argue with. Hey, Mary, we got to close today, but check it out. Let's talk about 2 more things. The personal responsibility of, as Malcolm X would say, the so-called black person in America. Does this presidency mean carte blanche for black people?
Well, what it means is that black people now have a mirror that they can hold up and look to and see that this is the model and the image of the true black family. This is a candidate who was raised by a single mother. This is a person who was raised by grandparents. This is a person who had to struggle through, temptations. This is a person who got an education and proved that regardless of what circumstances you are born into, that you can succeed. That I would agree with.
Yeah, most definitely. And final note, racism, Mary. Do we concentrate specifically on it every day and look for it and try to eradicate it, or do we just simply address racism as needed?
You address it as a social justice issue. So that means that you look at it in a way that if this is affecting our community, if this is affecting our homes, then this is how we have to go about addressing it.
Yeah. Mary, Inglewood, let's just talk about violence in black communities on the west side and south side of Chicago. You know, can we get rid of that as well? Because there are people in other communities that are saying, oh, just let the blacks kill themselves and they don't know how to live and they don't have nuclear families. What should we be telling Garrard McClendon, Mary Mitchell, what should we be telling black people about how to eradicate violence?
Educate your child, educate your children, give them an opportunity, because educated person is not preying on another person. An educated person is not out here desperate to knock somebody in the head and take their money. An educated person is not lured away by the lie of gangs and drugs. So we have to make sure that we hold this administration, this new incoming administration, accountable.